Hey, everybody. Give me just a minute. Okay. Hey, David.
Good morning.
Hey, Daniel.
Hello.
And Eric.
Hello.
How?
No.
John.
Hello.
Yeah. Matthew.
Hey, Doug.
God, I can't spell your name today.
Hello.
Hey, Clemens.
I did work on the code, Doug. I just didn't get it done.
I was going to ask you about that because you said you'd ping me.
Yeah, I know, and I had the intention of pinging you, but I just didn't get to the point of making it worth your time.
Understood. Okay. Hey, Tommy.
Yo.
Yo. Mark.
Hey, Doug.
Hello. Christian.
Hey, good morning.
Hey. And Jem. Well, hey, Jem. Been a while.
Yeah, I'm here, but only on the understanding you don't ask me any follow-up questions.
Okay, fine. Ryan.
Hello.
Hey. And let's see who else. Miss Ginger.
Hello, Doug.
Hello. I think I got everybody else. Okay, let's see here. Okay, just another minute, then we'll get started. Okay. So assuming, John, you want to at least mention your new section, so I'll move that into there. Whoa, that's not what I want to do.
Yep, happy to mention stuff. As noted, I need to go halfway through, I'm afraid. But that's okay, because I'm not expecting to do more than mention. So
Okay, cool. In that case, let me just get somebody else came flying in. Jesse, you there?
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome. And Klaus is on his way in. I'll get him later. All right, let's get started. What do we have here? 16. Okay. Okay, we'll get to that later. Community time. Okay, anything from the community people want to bring up that's not on the agenda? Do we still even need this? I'm tired of asking. Think about it. You don't have to answer right now. It just seems kind of weird. Okay, if we have time, I'd like to at least see where we are relative to Discovery Interop after this call, so please hang on the line if you're interested. For KubeCon North America, yesterday I got a note saying go ahead and sign up for the pavilion. I tried to find a time as early in the day as possible to try to get our European folks to be able to join. So I grabbed noon Eastern on Monday, October 11th. Hopefully that's okay for people. Between now and October, we'll be looking for at least some volunteers to hang out there. So try to see if your schedule fits that and volunteer, or let me know if you can cover the time. It is just 45 minutes, so it should be fairly easy. Ryan did volunteer for KubeCon China. So thank you, Ryan, for that. Appreciate it. Anything else relative to either KubeCon that people want to bring up? All right, Timur is not on the call. At least I don't think he is. Nope, not. Okay, so nothing for workflow. All right, Daniel, I know you've been working really hard on this one. Would you like to bring us up to speed on where we are with this one?
Yeah, so Doug and John Skeets went through, did another pass through, and I think it seems like it looks okay to both of you. I believe we're at the point now where it's basically ready to merge if there's no other comments. So yeah, I just wanted to see if there's anyone, maybe if there's anyone on the call who hasn't yet had a chance to look over it and wants to. If not, maybe we can.
Well, I think based on the fact, I don't know whether they made large or small changes last night or this morning, but we may need to wait at least another week for people to review it because there was a bit of churn. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think the overall gist of it is, if we know it's JSON, then it's a JSON object for the data attribute. Otherwise, it gets serialized as a string, at least in the non-binary case, right?
Yes, yes.
Does that sound right to people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much that changes previous practice compared with what was happening before. It's just infinitely clearer. And thank you, Daniel, for making it infinitely clearer.
Yeah, I love the examples down here because yesterday I was reading through this. This one jumped out at me. I thought, oh gosh, there's a mistake because of the quotes. Then I realized, no, it's because of the JSON thing, and that's the way it's supposed to be.
And that actually leads me on to sort of one aspect of reviewing this. And if you remember my HTTP value encoding stuff, it feels like we're kind of missing a conformance test suite that would be able to check the validity of SDKs doing this sort of thing. That may be something that we want to think about more in the future. I would love to have something that would show me how conformant the C# SDK is to all the expectations that other people have.
Yeah, I think Scott was trying to sort of lead that effort of doing some kind of conformance test suite. I just don't know the status of it.
I think there were a couple, like there's 2 cucumber tests that are available already as just kind of a starting point. So it might be worth adding to that. I was actually considering adding several tests to test this this stuff to that suite.
So, but definitely would be a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anybody else have any questions on this? Do people want more time to review it?
I just want to say thank you to you guys for doing this. I haven't read it, to be honest, but it's, from what I can see looking at this, it's exactly what I thought it should have been doing. So if it's what I think it is, then I'm wholeheartedly behind it. Thank you.
Kudos. So I need to hear from folks because I don't want to unnecessarily delay it. But if no one's going to really change their review status between now and next week, then there's no point in waiting either. So does anybody want more time?
I wouldn't mind the chance to just go through it today formally and just, just take a once over. But if other people have already summed it up, then, I'm willing to go with that.
I think John and myself are the only ones that have officially given it a thumbs up. So I think another week would just be fair because this is kind of a big change. And the other thing I think people need to look through, and I have to admit, I've only kind of done this myself, not fully. I would like a little more time to do it, is to read through it to make sure we don't feel like we are doing something that's incompatible with what we intended to do in the past, right? I know, for example, there's a whole bunch of new normative keywords in here, but our intention was always that they were just added for clarification purposes because that's what we intended to say, but we just kind of messed up the first time around. But we need to make sure we're not actually going to break people.
Yeah, and certainly for the C# SDK, this may be very slightly breaking in the extreme case of where the data is a number. I believe I'm currently serializing that as a JSON number instead of a string representation of that number, for example. So I think other SDKs may have something similar, but that's precisely why it's good to be precise about it. And I have no problems making that kind of breaking change, because frankly, who has an event where the data is just an integer or something? But it's I would suggest that SDK owners in particular should have a look and see whether this is what they've implemented already.
Yeah. Okay. So let's give you a week just to do that double check, and then we can hopefully merge it next week. Does that sound fair?
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Not hearing any other comments. Let's keep moving forward then. Clemens, I don't think you introduced this one last time, because I think you were feeling a little under the weather. So would you like to introduce this one? Let me get to the meat of the thing.
Yeah, I introduced the, this is something I did in the Open API spec. I added that and then kind of forgot to describe it in the actual spec. So this is effectively for a sync, a subscription sync. We also need to have a credential effectively, and that is the information that is required to actually be authorized at that sync, and the protocols will have their own mechanisms to do this, but they need to have input to go and do that work. And so they need to have a somewhat generic way to get them that information that the protocols can go and use that. And we have defined, so the sync credential is effectively taking a map of attributes that are of type of a credential type and further credentials, and then we basically just carry that data. If you scroll a little bit further down, so there's the credential. The sync credentials are effectively, these are the attributes that are defined for that map. So there's a credential type. Predefined are, it can be anything. Predefined are plain, access token, and refresh token, which are building on top of each other. Then you have, for the type plain, you have a identifier and a secret. And then for type access token and refresh token, you have an access token, because typically with a refresh token, you also get an access token. And then you have the information about when that access token expires. You have a type of what that access token is. And then for the refresh token type, which is effectively an extension of the access token type, you then also have the refresh token, and then you have the refresh token endpoint, where you can trade that refresh token for an access token. So this is effectively modeling the model of OAuth 2 here without being necessarily specific. So if you had another mechanism to go and do refreshes, and it's not conforming with OAuth 2 for the particular protocol, that's fine. So what I'm trying to do here is to effectively have a generic container with well-defined fields, which gives you identifier and secret, username and password, however we want to call this, and a way to go and also have a token with an expiration, and then have a second token with a token endpoint that will then allow you to go and acquire a new refresh token as it is in OAuth 2. So I'm trying to be specific and then not be too specific about how the particular sync endpoint is leveraging that information and the protocol underneath it.
I think the rest is just formatting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some formatting that and that is the formatting is because I had to insert a yeah. a bullet.
Any questions for Clemens? Anybody have any concern about adding the concept of this, ignoring the actual text itself, just the concept of adding sync credentials to the spec? Okay. I think my only question for you, and I think I put it in there last night, was, is it clear how all these things get manifested on the wire? Do you need to say which
it is not, because that really depends on the protocol. So if you have an endpoint, so let's say you have an AMQP endpoint, the AMQP endpoint you start talking to, and it gives you the option of you go into a SASL negotiation, and it offers you a SASL plane, and you have in your sync credentials, you have the credential type is plain, and you have an identifier and a secret. Well, those things match. If you have, and if it offers you OAuth also as a mechanism, and you have that information too, well, then you can go and pass an access token. So it kind of depends on your protocol. And then if you're doing HTTP, again, there it will depend on your knowledge of the HTTP endpoint, and if that talks OAuth to you, or it takes effectively an access token, then you would use that with the authorization header. And you would probably go and take the access token that you get here, that literal string, and you would go and paste that into the authorization header and try. And if you have a username and a secret, then you might either use that for transport level authorization, which is unusual, or in some other way with the authorization header, right? Digest authorization, etc. But that really depends on the particular rules of that endpoint. So that's something that in the subscription API per se, I can't define, because we don't have a that would be basically go into the protocol rules, not here.
So wait, I want to make sure that it was that last sentence, I think, was the key for me. Are you saying that the protocol section of the service definition in the discovery endpoint would tell how to put, you know, the identifier into the message?
Yes, probably. So you would have to, and I haven't looked that far yet, but in the protocol rules, since we're effectively the way how the subscription information is being used is that the owner of the endpoint is basically telling the delivery agent to come back and go and send events. So it gives a credential, but then it also needs to go and provide some more details about what the endpoint is. Sometimes there is negotiation, as I said, with SASL, there's negotiation which kind of makes that clear. But with HTTP, there is no handshake of that sort. So you have to kind of know ahead of time what the authorization header needs to contain.
Yeah, and that's why I was getting a little confused, because at some point in your explanation there, you made it sound like the sync kind of gets to choose what kind of credentials it is and how the credentials appear. But then you start talking about the discovery endpoint has it in its protocol stuff.
It does in the case of negotiable credential, in negotiable authentication or authorization protocols. So with SASL, the sync gets to offers a mechanism or multiple mechanisms, and then the client can go and pick between them.
Right, but if for HTTP, are you assuming that
for HTTP we have to go and we have to pick something? Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm more worried about, is the HTTP case. And
yeah. So, but that doesn't that needs to go into the protocol section.
Right, but if it goes in, when you say the protocol section, I assume you mean inside the discovery endpoint, which means it's dictated by the sender, not the sync.
We have in the subscriptions, we have a protocol section.
Oh, in the subscription, got it. Okay, that makes more sense to me. Okay, that's why I was confused.
but that's the piece I haven't done that yet.
Got it. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. I think this has actually been out there for a little while.
Yeah.
Do people want more time to contemplate this one? I'm not hearing any. In that case, I'm okay with trying to vote on it. My only question is, you may want to double check. I think it may be complaining about the RFC keywords. In particular, the one that jumped out at me yesterday was, I think you used a required here when you didn't mean a keyword.
Oh,
You may want to just double check and see what other things it's complaining about. I haven't actually looked.
okay. I'll go look.
But aside from that, I think that's a minor thing.
Yeah, and I'll go and also peek another time at the protocol section. But this is, I mean, this is independent of how we map those things. Like this is going to be this is enough. So my point is, this is enough information for someone to go and build an implementation that will work against, let's say, an MQP endpoint and also against an HTTP endpoint. It's just that there's probably more negotiation that we can go and add.
Yep. Okay.
So yeah, I'll make those corrections, and then so let's go and take this step by step.
Yeah, I guess I forgot. The only other question I had is, here you said should not. Is there any reason you didn't make it a must not?
Because I'm I don't feel that I need to be so paternalistic about people not retrieving and showing passwords. It's like, you should really not do it, but like there might be cases where it may make sense for you to return them. So I'm not gonna, like, you are authorized and you come over, you have special authorization, you're the grandmaster or super administrator, it might be okay to retrieve passwords.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else want to chime in or have an opinion on that? Okay, so barring the possible RFC keyword case issue, anybody have any objection to approving this? Anybody want more time to review it? Okay, so Clemens, if you can make the bot happy, then we can merge it.
Yes, sir, I will make the bot happy.
Good, cool, thank you, sir. And all right, cool. Thank you very much for that one. Let's see. Discovery, add history. All right, so Eric, I don't think you've made any changes to this one. So let's get down to the meat.
Nope, nothing different.
Okay, let's hide the comments for a second here. Okay, does anybody have any questions about this one? Does everybody understand what Eric is going for? Okay, I'll speak up then. I don't think I have a problem with this as a technical solution. My only hesitation, and it's not a very large hesitation, but my only hesitation is whether this is, I can't think of the right words for it other than the phrase scope creep comes into mind. I worry about whether this is trying to run before we walk kind of a thing, right? And like I said, I don't necessarily have a problem with it other than I just don't know how many people are going to use this, and I worry about adding more things before we get the core stuff put in place. But that's about it. I mean, do people think this is going to be a very popular feature? I mean, Eric, do you have a sense of whether this is required for a non-zero percentage of use cases, or is it just an interesting feature?
So
For me, I hear what you're saying. I mean, and it doesn't kind of comply with the more historically prominent kind of interior architecture, RESTful services sort of approach. For me, this is about enabling a use case that is far more about processing ordered list of events. It's kind of a which way do you like to build systems? So, you know, and you know, I obviously come with a bias because this is a way that I prefer building systems, but it seems to me that this allows for improved consistency or consistency where it wasn't possible in some cases. I don't know what more to say than that, but
That's fine. That's fine. Like I said, it's not like a formal objection or anything like that. It's just that's my worry bead that's running through my head as I think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but not enough to say I'd vote no against it, you know, that kind of thing.
I think in some ways you're right that it's coming a little bit out of left field. It hasn't been kind of the main line of how people are developing systems, but I don't know, there's also been a large uptick in the people doing these sorts of things. You know, the rise of Kafka and all of the other systems similar to it.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this is, while I personally haven't seen the need for this kind of thing, I actually am a little surprised that I haven't heard, say, like Clemens or Klaus say this actually might be interesting, because all the use cases you guys have been talking about, where you have such a distributed system with possibility of syncing data between all the various discovery endpoints you have out there, I thought this may be something that you guys would be interested in. And if you guys said, yeah, no, we could definitely use this kind of thing, then it would alleviate some of those concerns that I had.
Well, how much is this not just an open API definition? Like there is a bunch of management requests, but we already have an open API definition for discovery, right? How does that, so if a discovery endpoint wants to say this is how I want to be called, why doesn't it just return the open API definition?
So the purpose here is that as management requests occur, that they will be also replicated and sent out as events. So that if you are maintaining a mirror, as you receive those events, you can update your materialization, and that allows you to maintain the mirror. And you know, there's
a violation of principles here, and that is we don't do request response. Like we have scoped out correlation between messages explicitly, because we didn't want to go down the path of trying to do a generic messaging solution. So there is what you're modeling here, the request and the response is actually a concept that doesn't exist in cloud events. All the operations against the management endpoint are local, are operating effectively on the local discovery store. And then you can announce state changes as events, but the operation per se is not being replicated. You know what the difference? Understand the difference?
I'm not sure what Eric's response is, but mine is, can you repeat that? Just to make sure I got
Okay,
it.
so you can either go and replicate the put object operation, and then you replicate out the put object operation, and you also replicate the response to it to another service, or you do a put object operation, realize it in your store, and then as you realize that, then the realization of that, which means the state change, that is causing an event to be raised. The object changed. That's an event, but you're not replicating the operation. You're replicating the state change.
think that's what he's doing here, other than he's allowing you to.
Well, there's a
not
request
just
and there's a response. And if there's a response, then there's something that we don't have.
I am
I see.
including a bit more than just the state change. The notion is here's what I was asked to do here, and here is what I did about it, and that the reason is, say for example, you're creating an ID within the service, and in order to maintain the stability of, say, an ID mapping, if the mirror is going to maintain a separate ID, you might want to know what that ID is.
But, well, there's a master for that ID. That's why we have this notion of authorities, etc. Right? So there's going to be, for any identity that's being issued, there's going to be an authority that is the master of that identity. So it's I don't know where that so that information here is effectively a trace of effectively of the RPC call that has been made on the system, and then gets now replicated to other systems, but they are now being asked to effectively perform the same operation.
Well, maybe they will, and maybe they won't. Maybe they are going to mask the original ID, for example.
Yeah, but the other, so I mean, in general, most of the scenarios that certainly I see being used with eventing and with cloud events per se, is that you are making a change to, so you're causing a change to a store and to some object graph. And as you've been making the change, as you've caused the change to the object graph, then whatever change was made is then reported out as a fact, as an event. And then if you want to keep track of all the changes in a secondary store, you will go and take those events and then kind of realize those changes in your store. But it's not clear to me that the response matters here, because the response really is the object that you will raise the event about. Like, so the request, like the input into the operation, should not matter to anybody, because the output, the result of that operation, is what it has been materialized in that store, and that is the fact that is being transported out as an event. So I don't know why the request and the response, why that information about the possibly incomplete input that was put into the operation and that then gets completed and then also filled in with an ID, etc. Why the input that was posed by some client, why that would matter to some downstream client.
So Clement, are you saying that we should not have request and response? We should just have new state?
It is the objects that exist in the system. When they change, they will raise events. I mean, that's what I've been doing kind of in the schema. If the schema registry, right, has events for when a schema or a schema version changed, and then you make them known. And here there's a service object, and if the service object changes, you will have an event that is being raised about the service object having changed, and then you can go and replicate that out. But the request response that leads there is not of interest to anybody who's interested in the data. That's my argument.
So I think it's a little fuzzier if we are in this kind. One thing I'm not concerned. I'm not clear on exactly what concern, what problem you think is created by providing this. It's probably often excess information. I would agree to that. But the thing, if we change this to say the event something more like I'm adding a item to a cart. And the result of that is a materialization of what a cart contains. Then the difference that we're talking about here is receiving the actions that a user is taking of adding things, removing things, and saying, here is what the latest version of the cart is.
That, yeah, and you can get the same thing if you go and take the events if you take the state change events and spool them into a log, and then you read the log. But forcing everybody to kind of to do all the bookkeeping inside of their own services to keep a whole history is something that seems overly complicated.
Well, that isn't required. It's
Well,
certainly
you're putting
history
into the
here.
spec a thing that's called changes.
Right, 916. The discovery service may offer partial or complete history. There's certainly no requirement that they do.
But this is like you mandate, as if you were mandating effectively a change feed of every database. Instead of attaching
I
it
wish
as a
more
CDC, as a
databases offered
CDC
that.
capability on the outside. Because what you're doing here is effectively you're defining a CDC capability, but the CDC the CDC capability is mandated based on the inputs from the client and the responses to this, and not even on the prior state and the next and the end state of the object, which you would typically do with CDC, if you wanted to do it that way.
Well, wait a minute, Clemens, wait. Let's make sure we're talking about the same thing here. Ignoring for a minute what data is returned.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of just asking for a history of things is optional. Are you objecting to just it even being optional, or are you?
Yeah, I'm just saying I'm saying that's a complication in the spec that is I don't see how that's valuable. And it's something that, you know, it's a may provision, but ultimately for building a thing that claims conformance, and we have built a cloud event thing and it implements cloud events discovery, customers will then come and say, hey, I want to have this changes feature. And so there it's like, it's not really a choice, right? If there's a changes feature, if there's a change feeds capability in that spec, then everybody has to effectively implement it who builds product with this. And I just don't think that this helps the discovery capability that we're defining, right? Because ultimately this is tracking the state changes of that database. But I'm not sure what use case relative to discovery dissatisfies. So I don't understand. So yeah, I don't understand the motivation for it. In addition to that, I have issues with the way how this is done, and the way how and if you take, can we take a quick look at the schema registry spec?
Sure.
That's in no, it's in the own folder.
That's right. I forgot.
At the bottom.
Oh.
Okay, so here we have the schema registry deleted event, the schema registry updated event, and that basically just explains what the objects are. So if we say that the registry and also discovery, right, themselves are emitting cloud events, then what you can do is you can go and subscribe to that feed for the entire registry, which will give you then effectively all the objects that are being changed, right? And you record them. And if you want to have the history of them, then you have the entire, you basically just spool them all into a Kafka topic or into a database, and you have them all. So that's the more generic mechanism. And that is within within the scope of cloud events, right? We're just using
That's true,
events.
Clemens. How do you
Huh?
do that if there's a history that exists before you or your system's interaction with the source system?
Why would you care about that? That's I have a problem with the history use case per se, right?
Okay, so
but I have more of a problem with the history use case before you even showed up. Like I don't know what the purpose of that is. I don't know what the scenario is that would be driving that requirement.
okay, well,
go ahead, sorry.
something I can probably efficiently say is that I have a bias towards event sourcing when I'm able to do it.
Yeah, and event sourcing is literally done out of, you capture state changes and you spool them out into an event store, and then you can go and reconstitute your state from the event store. So that's basically what I'm saying. You have a registry, right? And so in the schema registry case, you have a registry, and then every change in that registry is being spooled into that database, right? And if you start recording these changes late, well, then you're only going to get the changes from the point when you started recording them. But that's true for any event sourcing system.
Not necessarily, not if there's archives in history. So
yeah, I mean, you have
the scenario is
snapshot.
that you have a different use case that you didn't originally imagine, and you want to reprocess the history according to that use case.
Yeah. If you're saying it that way, you're now effectively forcing everybody to go and implement an event store behind get changes. that's ultimately what you're getting at.
It is an optional feature.
And yeah, and I think if we do this here, then we have to do this on all the specs. and I don't see the urgent need to go and do this. And to effectively force everybody to implement it, because anything that's a may provision here for a feature of that magnitude, like this is not a may that is a aspect of a particular an operation. This is an extra operation which is explicitly called out in the spec, which you may implement, but ultimately customers will show up and say, oh, there is history in the discovery spec, so I really want that. That's how that's going to play out. And
okay,
I don't see the
saying
reason
that,
for it.
and it doesn't seem clear to me that you can't just say we don't implement that. I mean, it is the case that say on Cosmos DB that you don't implement all of the MongoDB features.
Yeah, right? So far I haven't seen a except for event sourcing is nice. I haven't seen a scenario where that is actually needed.
So
Does
go ahead, Jim.
Say, does this cover the excuse me, like an audit requirement where you're trying to maybe ask what's changed and discover when, who changed what, what subscriptions moved? Was the intent to try and cover that sort of use case, or was it literally for essentially, as you say, sort of mirroring stuff?
Eric?
I'm not sure I 100% caught exactly what you're asking. I think that there is a difference in system building conception that this facilitates, whereas the previous model, without this, those system designs are not facilitated. And that's the origin of why I've offered this as a suggestion.
Okay.
Now, Clemens, the comment isn't on screen. I actually would greatly prefer that this be something that particularly this changes bit. I don't particularly like the get changes. I would far prefer that there be a subscription mechanism that allows you to declare at what point, from which point would you like to receive changes that can go back in time.
But that is that I think of that really as you take a conceptual dependency on an event store. You're now requiring effectively that someone has a forever retention Kafka topic or forever retention event store implementation of some sort, where that they can rely on, or a database that can go and store those events. So you're effectively now you're conceptually baking an event sourcing a store requirement into that spec, and that's why I'm opposed to that, because it doesn't help with interop.
It feels like that's really being overstated. So because Kafka is a valid transport doesn't mean that everybody will support Kafka.
That's correct.
Right. I mean, in the same way that, even if I know that there is some Kafka in between me, I can't through Cloud Events ask for the guarantees that Kafka provides.
Yeah, but if you're saying, hey, I want to have the history of these changes, right? Since then, you're now demanding with that someone actually keeps history.
Well, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily available.
Yeah, but you're forcing. I think of that really as an implementation. That's an implementation detail. That's a choice that you make for your particular system, that you really want to have that history. But I don't think it helps interoperability.
Well, actually, let me jump in here for a sec. Because Eric, you said something interesting there. You said you'd almost prefer if this mechanism wasn't done through a get changes kind of thing, but rather it was part of the subscription spec, where there was an optional configuration flag, for example, that said, hey, I don't want just events from now forward, but I want events since yesterday. Clemens,
since the earliest you have them.
Yeah. So Clemens, if there was an option on this in the subscription spec that allowed someone to advertise that they support retrieving history and allowed for a subscriber to ask for that history, would that be more something you can get behind?
We can certainly consider defining a subscription which has a notion of an initial offset.
Right, because that's what I was thinking. Because the way you phrase that reminds me of Kafka, right? It's not always just from now. You can go back in time at least a little. Yes.
So
I think the indication to support this could be part of the discovery spec then.
Yes. The announcing it could be part of the discovery that you can go and define a offset, and then specifying the offset would be done in the subscription.
Right. Eric, would that address your needs?
I would prefer it be handled in the subscription, and then the 916 and onward would be removed.
Okay. So then the question becomes, what does the actual data look like in those things, right?
Yeah, I have suggested that history would be a very nice thing, and I would prefer to have it. No one took it up, so that's fine. And so I offered this. If Clemens, you're welcome to offer a preferred form for the data, a preferred kind of strategy for what is being presented in the data. That's fine. I wasn't particularly in love with the particular what was offered in the schema registry, but that doesn't mean that we can't do that. Certainly.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we need to have the objects need to be the state changes need to be represented, and those are if we offer them up via events, we would have to do something similar here, and that's actually something that because we want to go and replicate discovery, we'll have to have events defined for this, and then if we do this, then we can then make a mechanism that if you can subscribe to those events, then you could also specify with the mechanism that we just mentioned, that you can then probably go and also make a subscription that looks back into history if that's offered up. And that would then, I think, satisfy your use case. So there is a replication mechanism which always kind of fires an event when a change happens. That's the normal case, and we need to have this anyways because we need to have these replication of discovery and replication of schema, etc., along the flow path, and that's what Klaus discussed last week. And then the extra feature that implementation can offer on top of this is to then use this mechanism that we just discussed, which will then allow you to go to that same endpoint and ask for all the changes, not since now, but also since the beginning of time, effectively. And if your implementation then offers that up by discovery and by supporting that kind of subscription, you can, from that same endpoint, you can pull all the history out. And the history will then be all the change events in sequence.
Does that sound like a viable direction, Eric?
I think he shouldn't have said in sequence at the end there, but yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I'm happy to continue improving the details on this. I didn't expect that it was perfect, certainly.
I like the way this discussion has been going. I think we may end up at a nicer spot, which is nice.
This is one of those discussions, as some others with Eric, really, that I would love for us to do a face-to-face at some point again, so that this ended up being super productive, and I'm very glad. But I'm always worried about how this comes around. I'm so sorry.
No, this is good. Because what excites me about this is giving Eric the functionality he needs under the scope of something we already kind of have with just a minor tweak feels more natural to me than a whole new, basically, endpoint that implies something grandiose, as opposed to, oh, do you do history, yes or no?
Yeah.
On the subscribe. That makes it feel much better about the whole thing. Okay. So what's the next steps here then? Because I want to make sure there's something concrete. Are one of you volunteering to take the next step here to do something?
I think Klaus wants to extend the discovery spec with events anyways.
Yes, that's true.
And I need to make changes to the subscription spec too. So we can probably split that between ourselves.
Okay, so Klaus was going to do the events from the discovery endpoints. Where were you working on, Clemens? Just take
I'm gonna think about how we can go and put that into the subscription spec.
You mean the history stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Is that okay with you, Eric? Does that sound right? Those two things as stepstones to where you want to be?
I certainly don't mind them taking the effort and doing what seems best for them on it. I guess I am wondering what we do with this spec. Should I close it out? Do we accept it and then modify the events, or I mean, if no one's commented yet, so if comments are very welcome, and I'd be happy to update and work on it, iterate if that's what's preferred.
I would prefer to keep it there, because I like having it there as, if nothing else, a nagging reminder for us to do the other things. But let's see what Klaus and Clemens come back with, and whether that has to get incorporated into your PR, or there are separate PRs because they're smaller stepping stones to solve what your PR is trying to do. And then when we're done, we'll close your PR in favor of their stuff. We'll figure that out later. But I don't want to close yours because I don't want it to fall off our radar or get lost. We just don't know yet what we're going to do with it, or how this is going to morph. Whether this thing will morph or something else will take its place. But
okay, sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Any other comments on this discussion? All right, cool. All right, thank you, Eric, for all that. So, okay, before I forget, so John had to take off, but he said he added a comment or a section into his document to talk about the restructure. So please take it, when you get a chance, everybody please take a look at that and read through it. And then on mine, I don't have time to go through it necessarily, but I do want to bring it to your attention. What I basically did is, just refresh your memory, this is all about when people do a filter or a query, say, hey, I want all the services that match this particular characteristic. What happens if they specify a filter on a field that the discovery endpoint does not support filtering over? Okay. And my initial response was, well, we should throw an error so the user knows we're not going to filter over that, as opposed to an empty set means nothing was there. Ryan pushed back on that. He had some concerns about that being a little too strict. But during the thought process there, I realized, well, maybe what we should do is add a query parameter on top or in front of the actual query itself. Because before this, people would just say $name equals foo. And I'm suggesting something like $filter equals name equals foo. That way, it's not just, oh, we just flat out reject all query parameters we don't like, because that probably is a little too strict. But then we can say, no, we're going to just reject everything under the filter query parameter, because that's clearly within the domain of discovery endpoint, where other query parameters are extensions and stuff like that. And you may not necessarily want to reject all extensions from a query parameter perspective. But that's my current thought process. Don't need a big discussion right now. I just wanted to mention it. So please take a look at that. I'd love to hear what people think, whether that's sort of a nice compromise between Ryan's fear about being too strict and my wanting to allow the user or the client to know what was accepted versus unknown or rejected. Okay, so take a look at that when you get a chance. Any other things people want to bring up on the agenda? We have a whole 4 minutes left. Okay. Did I miss anybody for the attendee list? I think Ben was there and then he vanished. That's okay. We have Mark with VMware. Okay. In that case, if you're not interested in Discovery Interop, you may go and have a good rest of your day. For those interested in Discovery Interop, I think the only thing on there is I just want to find out where people were in terms of bringing up their endpoints to match the small little test case I had here. So Clemens, I was going to pick on you in terms of finding out your status that you may have already given it. Anything else you want to say, Clemens, other than you're actively working on it?
Yeah, I'm actively working on it, and you will soon hear from me. I've been having some unexpected issues porting this to .NET 5, so I need to understand those.
Cool. Just ping me when you're ready.
Yeah.
Anybody else on the call working on an endpoint? Okay, I think so. Okay. In that case, there's no point in hanging out anymore. Any other topics you want to bring up at all? All right, that's it then. Okay, thank you all very much, and thanks everybody for the good conversation. I think Eric took off, so he may be a little frustrated with that, but I actually think we're going to end up at a really good spot with that. I really like the way that conversation went. I love doing
me too.
stuff like that. It's always fun. So cool. Okay, thanks everybody.
All right.
Have a good day.
Bye.